Hi there, everyone, and welcome to the Daily Gardener, and thank you for listening. I'm your host, Jennifer Ebling. It's January 7th. Today we celebrate an American poet, an essayist, and an editor who is often remembered in a photograph where she's dressed as Saint Barbara with a laurel wreath around her head. We'll also learn about the woman who started a flower club that offered rare and exotic plants to Swedish homemakers during World War II. We'll hear about enticing words used to describe the gorgeous plants in garden catalogs. They work so well on gardeners. And then we'll grow that garden library today with an old book by a stylist who loves to incorporate nature into her interior designs. And finally, we'll wrap things up with a cheery story about the man who saw life through rose-colored glasses. Chin up. But first, I'd like to take a second to tell you about the Daily Gardener Friday newsletter. Every Friday, I send out the Daily Gardener newsletter, and it shows up as an email in your inbox. The newsletter is something I put together every week, and it has some very lovely content that I put together just for you. I'd like to start out the newsletter with some personal photos and updates, a little bit about what's going on around here in my own home and garden, with the hope that it inspires you and gets you thinking about your own space and garden in new and exciting ways. Then, I like to include some garden to-dos and creative resources, as well as little reminders for the month. And I'm a shopper, so I love sharing deals that I find with listeners of the show. And if you're a fan of the show, you'll also notice some favorite aspects from the podcast to help you get through the weekend. You'll see a little botanical history, some botanical poetry, of course, and a lovely list of all the featured books from the Grow That Garden library for the week. So handy. And I like to say, if you enjoy the podcast, you're going to love the newsletter. So head on over to thedailygardener.org and sign up for the free Friday newsletter today. Here's today's curated news. Today's article is from Fine Gardening, and it was written by Kristen Green, and the title is Beautiful Bark on Deciduous Trees. What a fantastic topic for this time of year when things seem so glum at times out in the garden. And you know, that is especially the case if you have not invested in trees on your property. So what Kristen tells us to do in this article is to consider adding textural trunks. And she offers examples of captivating trees that give you winter interest. I love this article by Kristen. She shares trees that work in many different zones, and the pictures that she shares are fantastic. They're absolutely inspiring. Now, if you'd like to check out this post in the Facebook group for the show, all you need to do is type in the word bark. Let your dog help you to remember that keyword. Type that in to the Facebook group for the show, the Daily Gardener Community. That way you don't have to track this thing down. It's all right there for you. All the posts that I curate, whether it's something from another magazine or a newspaper, or an original blog post that I've written for you over at thedailygardener.org. So the next time you're on Facebook, all you need to do is search for Daily Gardener Community, where you'd search for a friend and request to join. I'd love to meet you in the group. Here's today's brevities. Today is the birthday of the American poet, essayist, and editor, Louise Imogen Guiney, who was born on this day, January 7th, in 1861. Louise was the daughter of a Tipperary-born Civil War general named Patrick Guiney. And after living in constant pain from his war injuries, Louise's father died when she was 16. But her dad's bravery and morality helped to shape Louise's work. As her family struggled to make ends meet, Louise worked several jobs. In 1894, she ended up working for her local post office in Auburndale, Massachusetts. She was the postmistress. And when locals protested her appointment because she was Catholic, her friends responded to the backlash by buying so many stamps that Louise kept her job and actually got a raise. And I like to think of that little incident that Louise experienced when I read a poem that's often attributed to her, but actually its origins are uncertain. But the poem goes like this. The foolish fears of what may come, I cast them all away. Among the clover-scented grass, among the new-mown hay, among the hushing of the corn, where drowsing poppies nod, ill thoughts can die, and good be born, out in the fields of God. During Louise's early life in Boston, she lived on Pinckney Street. And that street was a hub for creatives like Louisa May Alcott, Nathaniel Hawthorne, the Thoreau family, and the publisher Elizabeth Peabody. Imagine living there. Louise's work was featured in popular magazines like Harper's and the Atlantic Monthly. And as she matured in her adulthood, Louise fell in love with the history of England, and she made repeated trips there before permanently moving to the country in the early 1900s. In one of her beautiful pieces of correspondence, Louise was asked if her poem, A Song of the Lilac, could be set to music, and it was. It's got a charming verse that goes like this. And when by night the May wind blows, the lilac blooms apart, the memory of his first love is shaken on his heart. Today, if you search for Louise online, you'll see beautiful images of her dressed as Saint Barbara with a laurel wreath around her head. And in some photos, someone faintly penciled a halo above her head. And today is the birthday of the Swedish botanist and children's book author, Vivi Laurent-Täckholm. During World War II, Vivi started a flower club that offered rare and exotic plants to Swedish housewives. Vivi's club debuted several popular houseplants, including pothos and 2 types of plectranthus, green-leafed and variegated. And as Plectranthus australis grew in popularity, thanks to Vivi's flower club, it became known as Swedish ivy. Now, the genus name Plectranthus refers to the spur-shaped flowers, and it comes from the Greek words for spur and flower, plectron and anthos. And if you've never seen a Swedish ivy flower, well, don't worry, because the little flowers aren't particularly showy, but it sure is a thrill to get your Swedish ivy to bloom. I've had that pleasure, and I hope someday you will be able to enjoy it as well. Now, the species name australis means southern, and it refers to its native home of South Africa. And although it's neither Swedish nor an ivy, the stems trail, and it does resemble an ivy. With its square stems, it's easy to tell that Swedish ivy is a member of the mint family, and it's also related to the coleus. Now, I always like to say that Swedish ivy is a perfect first houseplant. It's excellent for beginners. I love to grow it in a tall or cylindrical planter or a hanging basket. And if you want to try to grow it, it's pretty simple. Swedish ivy thrives in bright, indirect light. Now, the key here is indirect light. Don't put it in full sun or the leaves will burn. And if your Swedish ivy looks leggy, it might need more light. And if your Swedish ivy has yellow leaves, it's probably overwatered. In fact, it's better to keep your Swedish ivy on the dry side than too wet. So think about that. If you've got some issues with your Swedish ivy, you're a little dissatisfied about it, then you're going to need to change the way that you're taking care of it. Now, that all said, I like to give my Swedish ivy a spa day every so often. I think that a lovely shower in the sink with a dollop of Dawn dish soap helps to keep my Swedish ivy dust-free, and it also helps to keep pests away, as well as providing more humidity, which they love. Finally, don't be afraid to prune your Swedish ivy. You can prune it back to 6-inch stems. I always think of it as giving my Swedish ivy a haircut. You don't just let these things grow on into infinity. They'll always look better with a little pruning, with a little shaping, just like your own hair. Then, once you've got those cuttings, you just put them in a vase of water, and in a few weeks, the cuttings will be rooted. And then you can just pop them into soil, and you'll have a whole new plant. You can also use this method to make your plant a little more robust, especially if you're just starting out with a few new cuttings. You can add more cuttings as you do your pruning, and you'll end up with a fuller-looking plant. Now, if you love the green-leafed Swedish ivy, you would probably also enjoy the sister species of this plant. So there's a variegated version that has white-edged leaves. I love that one. I especially love that in a bright-colored pot, something rust-colored or even purple. Looks spectacular with that. And then there's another species, the Argentatus, that features bright silvery leaves. Now, that one is really fun, and I love telling people that it's a sister to the Swedish ivy because they often don't believe me. And then finally, the Amboinicus, the Cuban or Caribbean oregano species, has large, soft green leaves. It's very friendly, but you get a bonus with it. You get a powerful oregano fragrance. And I love to have that in the kitchen. Wouldn't that be absolutely lovely in a pot on your kitchen counter? Wonderful. In Unearthed Words, today's words are from Beth Chatto, the garden writer and gardener, from her book, Beth Chatto's Garden Notebook, one of my favorites, and it's from her chapter on January. Here's a little excerpt. Since before Christmas, I have been nibbling in odd moments at my new catalog. I try to write word pictures of plants, which might make them irresistible. When I began the nursery 20 years ago, I issued a very small list with descriptions of plants as I saw them in place of photographs, which I could not have afforded. My catalog has grown with the nursery over the years, but there are still no pretty pictures. I have not actually gone into the cost because while I know they might help some readers, I myself, deep down, do not want to change. Does that sound familiar to gardeners? I think so. Beth continues. I am very attracted by good photographs in other catalogs, but I find I easily forget them. It's the difference between watching television and listening to a good radio play. I can take the works of the best writers and gardeners, such as Vita Sackville West, Graham Stewart Thomas, or Christopher Lloyd, to bed and be lost till midnight, reading their thoughts and seeing their plants and gardens as a musician hears music, reading a score. Beautiful. It's time to grow that garden library with today's book, A Passion for Detail by Charlotte Moss. This book came out in 1991. It's an oldie but goodie. It was one of Charlotte's first books. And in this book, Charlotte shares her interior design's beauty, which often includes elements from the natural world. To Charlotte, much of our space's visual appeal can be found in the little details, and the same is true with our gardens. In Charlotte's book, gardeners will be inspired by the variety of objects that Charlotte displays, from dried flowers and vases to specimen plants and vintage pots. Charlotte encourages us to see the beauty in everyday items and to incorporate things that bring us the most pleasure, even if those items are traditionally used outdoors in the garden. I love that. This book is 192 pages of inspiration, courtesy of Charlotte Moss, incorporating rustic whimsy and romance in the little details that create gorgeous rooms. You can get a copy of A Passion for Detail by Charlotte Moss and support the show using the Amazon link in today's show notes for around $3. That's a steal. It'd be fun to send that book to a garden friend as a nice little gesture of friendship. Finally, here's something sweet to revive the little botanic spark in your heart. It was on this day, January 7th, in 1927, that the American lyricist and columnist for the Atlanta Constitution, Frank Lebby Stanton, died. A son of the South, Frank was influenced by hymn writers like Isaac Watts and Charles Wesley. Extraordinarily popular during his lifetime, Frank's charming and straightforward verse evoked a feeling of nostalgia and sentiment. For instance, Frank wrote the words to the Tin Pan Alley hit song, Mighty Like a Rose. And among Frank's many famous verses is this one, so many creeds like the weeds in the sod, so many temples and only one God. And Frank's most famous four-lined verse is also a favorite of gardeners. It is inscribed on his Atlanta tombstone, and I've seen it written on many adorable garden signs. It says, "This world we're living in is mighty hard to beat. You get a thorn with every rose, but ain't the roses sweet?" Thanks for listening to The Daily Gardener, and remember, for a happy, healthy life, garden every day. The Daily Gardener is produced in lovely Wyoming, Minnesota with the help of Paige Mance, Brooke Bierbaum, Kiana Rayleigh, Maddie Doyle, Natalie Decker, and Eric Begay. You can find The Daily Gardener on all your favorite social media. You can follow the show on Instagram, and listeners always have a standing invitation to join the free Facebook group for the show. Just search for Daily Gardener Community the next time you're on Facebook and request to join. All the stories and books that are featured on the show can be found over at thedailygardener.org, thedailygardener.org. And while you're there, be sure to sign up for my free Friday newsletter. Last but not least, you can share your own gardener greetings on the show by emailing me at jennifer@thedailygardener.org. I'm your host, Jennifer Ebling, and as always, have a great day in the garden, and we'll see you tomorrow.